Okay, so things just got really strange in the Boruto 2 Blue Vortex story, and a lot of people are asking one major question. Because as it stands, as of chapter 23, as of the recording of this video, a lot of things went down in terms of what seemingly could be the final battle between Boruto and Jura of the Divine Tree people. Something happened there that once again changed the entirety of the future of the story, as well as the destiny and fate of these characters. Because most people, while they read this story up until this point, have kind of viewed the character Kashin Koji as essentially an end-all be-all in terms of the knowledge that he has regarding the future and all the different paths of potential of what could happen. But the thing about it is, it seems as though this story continues to rev up the engine and continues to add mystique regarding what potentially could happen, opposed to things being set in stone. Because where we're at with things right now, Boruto has just charged in, and essentially him and Jura have been throwing hands. He used the purple lightning on Jura. A lot of things have transpired in this battle that is essentially catapulting things to what could ultimately be the climax, assuming that Jura and the Divine Tree people are going to be the end and grandiose finale of this whole ordeal. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell if you want more videos, because to add a caveat there, even if the Divine Tree people are defeated, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Boruto story is going to completely end right there, because, well, there's a lot of potential for other things to happen that will continue the story far past the battle and the defeat, whenever that does happen, of the Divine Tree people and Jura. But nevertheless, one of the prophecies that was foretold to us regarding what Koji told Boruto is the fact that if Boruto went into battle against Jura, no ifs, ands, or buts, he was going to be defeated, and essentially he was going to, well, as they say, bite the big one. Because in every future path that Koji was able to see up until this point, Boruto was no match for Jura, despite the fact that, honestly, 2 Blue Vortex has really showcased that Boruto is him, and he has all of these capabilities that technically showed, yeah, he's on a godly level that Jura, ideally, if he wasn't as strong as he's been proclaimed to be, wouldn't be able to keep up with. I mean, the techniques that he's been wielding, like Minato's flying Raijin, the purple lightning, all of these techniques have been extraordinary. In fact, it's been foretold that if it wasn't for the intervention of Kashin Koji and all of the stuff that transpired within the time skip, essentially Boruto wouldn't have been able to accomplish obtaining those techniques for possibly a decade or even more into the future. So right now, Boruto is essentially like a walking cheat code in terms of combat. But clearly, as this battle has showcased, despite the fact that there was moments where it seemed as though Boruto wasn't completely far off against Jura, again, when he utilized the purple lightning and essentially the attack that he made on one of Jura's limbs, essentially Boruto isn't completely at a disadvantage. But nevertheless, as the chapter transpired, we've seen, well, Jura found a way to get the upper hand on Boruto, and essentially if it wasn't for the intervention of Kawaki, we probably would have been walking towards the path of what Koji had foreseen. Which brings everyone to one of the biggest things that a lot of the fandom is discussing at the moment, and that's that what's going on with Koji's ability, and why is it that despite the fact that he's been able to see things and essentially look into the future, things is basically being unexpectedly changed right in front of Koji's eyes thanks to what's happening on the battlefield. And that definitely leads to one major aspect that probably will continue to transpire throughout the story, and that's that when certain elements align and when certain characters work in unison, they have the power to manipulate reality and once again morph things. Look back to what happened a few chapters back when Sarada utilized her Mangekyo thanks to, again, her love for Boruto, and essentially was able to change certain aspects, which adds my first point of what potentially could be one of the key ingredients to essentially define the ability that Koji has. And it seems to be, as well, some might say corny, ultimately it's always been a very powerful staple in a lot of different stories and even in general. It seems as though a deep love and the desire to protect and essentially help the people you care about does allow characters to basically defy the odds, so to speak, and maneuver in a way that can affect the outcome of things, despite the fact that at times it seems like it's supposed to be predetermined. Think of it as like a wrestler going off script, and essentially because of the outcome of that particular line, the writers from behind the scenes have to essentially adjust and maneuver. That's pretty much the same scenario that we're seeing right here, which leads into number 2. Despite the fact that the Boruto story has set up from essentially the end of part 1 and the beginning of 2 Blue Vortex of this rivalry, and essentially some would argue what should be, or what potentially would have been, a hatred from Boruto to Kawaki because of the things that Kawaki utilized, and essentially, you know, that whole thing that he did with Ada changing reality. Yeah, ideally that brotherhood that we thought they had probably would have come to a complete and utter halt, and it should have changed into more of, well, the relationship that like Naruto and Sasuke had, in terms of, sure, Naruto had a love for him, but Sasuke was essentially dead set on leave me the heck alone. But it's very clear that the relationship between Boruto and Kawaki, while Kawaki still ultimately essentially has that goal that he will do by any means necessary, anything within his power to protect the 7th Hokage Naruto, even if it means striking down Boruto. Ultimately, their love for each other supersedes that, because even in this chapter, Kawaki is still referring to Boruto as his bro. So it's like he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, even though we know Kawaki, when it comes push to shove, he will ultimately make the choices that he feels are the right choices, even at the detriment of his own feelings, to protect the 7th. But essentially, the second point that was able to be utilized to maneuver and alter reality and essentially force an update to the story was something that Boruto did not far back, and that's when he had that secret meeting with Kawaki, where essentially he put everything to the side and not only was talking from a point of like, yo dog, you need to get better, was essentially able to relay a message of, yo, if we want to protect things, and I know you're not evil, you essentially have your own goals and you want to protect people in general, we need to work together to win. When he basically told him, yo, train up, do whatever you gotta do, essentially Amado has been kind of doing stuff behind the scenes anyway, figure it out, you need to get stronger so we can work together and put a stop to all of this. And potentially because of everything that Koji had foreseen, where basically it was not really a brotherly love and not really that type of relationship between Boruto and Kawaki, ultimately Koji couldn't have foreseen that Boruto, after getting this information of what the future might be like, would have this secret meeting with Kawaki and ultimately basically go off script, so to speak. Because the story is supposed to be, and essentially it almost feels very meta when you think about it, that Boruto and Kawaki have this epic rivalry that kind of borders into hatred, and essentially it would stop them from ever being able to collaborate and work together, and it wouldn't be able to put a halt to all of the madness that is going on in the shinobi world because, well, the relationship looked like it was strained to the point of no return. However, Boruto and all of the maturity that he was able to obtain due to, again, the training that he received with Kashi and Koji, and of course early on with Sasuke the first year of the time skip, it seems to be that a lot of that brought to fruition a Boruto that is not only mature enough to understand the circumstances, but even more so realize that he has the power to change things himself. I mean, it's not far off from Boruto and how he ended in part 1 of the manga, where essentially he even wasn't on a necessarily full-blown hate train towards Kawaki, because before he left in the time skip for the training with Sasuke, he basically said, despite everything that Kawaki did to me, no, I'm gonna just kick his butt and we're gonna fix this thing. But it's that level of maturity that Boruto was able to obtain throughout all of this to understand how to maneuver through situations in a calmly manner that brought forth the major change that we're seeing now. Which kind of also, I guess, adds an addition and an addendum to the whole ability that Koji has been wielding, in the fact that it's not set in stone and it's not definite. In fact, more so, if you think about it, Koji has been utilizing the fact that he has this capability of seeing the different futures and different paths to kind of warp reality itself. But you add in this wild card of Boruto and Kawaki working together, something that could never be foreseen, and now we were able to not only pick a certain reality, but even morph and create a whole new story altogether that never would have happened had Boruto not made the decision to essentially work together with his bro. And let's not forget the fact that Kawaki was actually willing to go along with this, because there's also the possibility that Kawaki could have shut this all down, say, no, I don't care, I'm not listening to you. The fact that Kawaki was able to put things aside and say, you know what, let's work together, let's do this, let's save the village for now, we'll get to our situation down the road, that also helped to make things happen. Which, while many fans might look at it as, oh my gosh, cringe, ultimately it definitely showcases that two of the main ingredients that allow for change to happen in general regarding manipulating the future is love, teamwork, and a lot of the aspects that, now I think about it, is the slogan of Shonen Jump. Let's not forget, Boruto is a spinoff of Naruto that comes from Shonen Jump, so the motto is gonna stick in there. What can you do? So yes, it definitely does seem like things is getting really strange. The fact that Koji even mentioned that it's been 6 days since he's got an update regarding the whole situation of the future, which even raises more questions. So like, this entire time, has he been getting updates and it just hasn't been that he's been picking one particular linear path to a victory, and throughout this time he's actually been seeing updates to begin with? Because then that raises even more questions of, okay, so Koji has essentially been also kind of gambling on a side venture, because it's not just a clear-cut thing of, okay, he's gambling on Boruto being able to do the things that he's telling him to do to make stuff happen. He's also been gambling on, while looking at this path that he's chosen and things being updated at the same time, that things are going to update in their favor, which I guess adds an extra element of a mystery, so to speak, or a risk, or just makes it that things aren't necessarily clear cut and dry, that this one path will lead to victory if everything is followed. Which you could throw the argument that that also means Koji potentially underestimated Boruto, because he probably thought Boruto would follow his instructions instructions to the T throughout everything, and since Boruto kind of went off script, things changed. Not to mention the fact that potentially because of this intervention between Boruto and Kawaki having that conversation, it could be why Kawaki showed up utilizing his old look. Kind of a metaphor of, while he's not entirely the old Kawaki that was abiding by, hey, I gotta stick to and follow a certain protocol set forth by the 7th and by essentially that old mindset, ultimately that love is definitely still there. And maybe it's a visual change to showcase that Koji couldn't have foreseen this, because maybe in all of his visions Kawaki was utilizing that new look, so this is kind of a visual demonstration of the change. So definitely major props to Boruto for essentially surpassing Koji's expectations, because, well, yeah, based on his actions and what has happened thus far between him and Kawaki, they have been able to create a new path and essentially a new story that could lead them to victory. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that the story is going to be over or that the threats are going to come to an end, because even if the Divine Tree people are defeated, Code is still a variable. Amado and the whole Shibai Otsutsuki situation is still out there as well. There's still stuff that needs to be handled, even if Jura and the Divine Tree people are put to an end. Not to mention that there's still 2 other Divine Trees that haven't been defeated yet, Bug and Hidari, which this is also setting up for Hidari versus Sarada at some given point. And that even leads to another possibility of, well, can Koji see if Jura's defeated, what happens with those 2? If Jura is defeated, does Hidari's heart soften up to the point where he decides that he doesn't want to go the route of going in a full-on bloodthirsty combat with Sarada, and it leads to more of maybe a battle of a sensei type of deal, because he still has some remnants of memories or feelings thanks to him being connected to the real Sasuke. So definitely a lot of questions to be answered in this whole scenario in terms of the future and Koji's ability. But regardless, one thing that can be said for certain is the future isn't set in stone entirely, and even though Koji can see all of these paths, ultimately it's not like every decision that Boruto makes that doesn't go according to his sensei's plans is a complete miss or will make things go in a disarray. In fact, if Boruto makes the right choices in terms of following his heart and what he truly believes is right, it can actually lead to an even better outcome than what potentially Koji could foresee. You'll never see better days if you quit. You only see forever. And this is Tim. Everything will be okay, be okay. Slowly